Hello and welcome to the eTech podcast with me, your host, Ryan Morn. I have been involved in the development of electrified vehicles and machines since 2005 as an engineer and a business leader. This podcast is the product of my passion for electric and autonomous vehicle technology. I'm here to share knowledge from some of the world's leading experts, as well as my own insights. Join me as we accelerate the transition to cleaner, safer and smarter vehicles and grow the industry around the world.
So for today's episode, we've got a really exciting conversation lined up. I have with me Mike Terzo, who is the director and co-founder of a business called Heavytech. But those of you who know him will know Mike has got a much longer history in the world of electrification. And he's probably forgotten more than I've ever known about this kind of stuff. So I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. Mike, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ryan. Excited to be here and chatting about what's going on our side and what's going on and just globally in the industry. So it should be fun.
So, Mike, maybe if we could just start, for those of you, the people out there who don't know you, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you came to be doing what you're doing now?
Yeah, sure. I'll give a quick overview. So I'm a mechanical engineer by education, but really I've just been sort of an entrepreneur for almost my entire career, going way back to I think the beginning of 2000. I founded a pool access lift company and developed and patented and commercialized a line of pool access lifts for disabled individuals. Sold that after several years, really very well with it. It was very a good commercial success. You could see it on hotel pools and spas all over North America and all over Europe. So that was sort of my first, entrepreneurial experience. Then I did a couple other things, and then I founded Terzo Power Systems, and that's when I really started seeing some of the things that needed to be developed in, I would say, the industrial / mobile / off highway / commercial trucking. We don't really have an exact term for which industry we're in, but high level, I would say I'm in maybe the fluid power industry. So I started Terzo Power Systems really to develop some niche pieces of technology that were missing out there for OEMs to continue their electrification journey. And we developed a line of electrohydraulic smart pumps. Back then, this was quite a while ago. Back then, there wasn't the tools that we have now in electrification development. So we had to really build out a robust internal team of engineers to do what we needed to do. It's still pretty tough, but it's a lot easier. We have a lot more tools now, and took that from just an idea in my garage to being a tier 1 supplier to heavy truck OEM all over the world. So it was a really fun journey. It was pretty much encapsulated everything about being an entrepreneur and also being in the electrification space. Again, that's means a lot to, it means something different to different types of people. But in general, saw the whole from 0 to 1 plus, I would say.
Yeah.
And really start commercializing. We set up contract manufacturing in the US, in Northern Italy and Mexico. So sold that about 3 years ago. And now I'm focused on the electrification and hybridization of off-highway equipment. So I really took what I did at Terzo Power Systems as more of a component, development company. And now said, okay, let's do the whole system for off highway. And that is what I've been doing for the last 3 years. And then last year, late last year, we decided to launch Heavytech. And it's I guess you could say, a wildly ambitious project to launch a new OEM into the space. But, I think it's needed. I think we have to show some of the amazing, performance and productivity benefits, I guess, you get from doing a clean sheet rethinking of electrification for heavy equipment. So Heavytech is focused on launching 3 different vehicle platforms. They're all in sort of the compact class: articulated compact loader, a compact track loader, and a mini excavator. So we're really looking to just show the world what we can do now that we have fairly mature technology out there in a lot of respects in electrification, but we haven't really taken the next step and developed that into fully integrated systems like the automotive has.
Yeah.
So we're going to do that for off highway. We're tightly designing the vehicles and the electrified powertrain, either hybrid or battery electric, from a greenfield,
Yeah.
looking at this, like what is possible. And it turns out there's some amazing, benefits we get to have that I can really dive into if we want to on the tech side.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Because actually thinking about it, the kind of USP with Terzo, or certainly as I saw it from the outside, because we were both in the same space at a similar time, and your hydraulic power systems, you were kind of one of the first people, I think, to go very like fully integrated. Before you started doing that, you get a hydraulic pump and you get a motor and you screw the two things together, and then you get some electronics and you stick that somewhere else. And it was very like component orientated, and there was no sort of integration about it. And it was really interesting, and caught my eye what you guys were doing with that, because we'd done a similar thing with some other component sets where we thought, actually bring these together, we can do some integration, there's cost savings, there's kind of performance benefits in that. But then you've kind of gone one step further, and you did that with the fluid power and like highly integration. But then the last couple of years you've been doing sort of powertrain systems and like very integrated thermal management solutions and stuff like that. Is there a reason why you keep going for the highly integrated, like sort of making everything, make it as one?
Well, I think it's the only way we can have, I guess, cost-effective solutions and products, the whole vehicles that are competitive. Because competitive means a lot of things, but I look at competitive meaning it's pretty much comparable in price. I think some industries might be able to absorb a premium price for electrification. Off highway, when companies buy an excavator or a skid steer telehandler, they need it to make money from day one, and so that's always been a challenge in our industry because it's there's a lot of good examples on why even a 1.2 or 1.5x premium
Mm.
is a tough sell in the industry. So I look at it as like the only way to achieve, you know, comparable costs is just wild integration and extreme dedication to innovative design on a holistic vehicle system,
Yeah.
and that's the only way that I've seen. So that's what we're doing, because as you said, taking components and bolting them together just doesn't quite work. And I saw that with our electrohydraulic pumps. If you're taking just a steering pump, once you either decouple the ICE engine or remove the ICE engine, um, you can't have like 10, 12 different components just to power your hydraulic steering. So that was at maybe a component level, and we have to do it for the whole system. And I'm just passionate about that process, because I think it's, I've seen in the background like what we can actually achieve by doing that, sort of both at a bench level and at a light integration level, and saw like, okay, the true benefits are there, the technology for the most part is there. What's missing is somebody just has to wake up and say, you know what, we're just going to do the whole thing. And in a perfect world, I would say like, oh man, the OEMs would just jump on that and they'd be doing it. But OEMs are constrained by a whole different set of risk tolerances that
Yeah.
startups and new companies, they don't have. So I think it's incumbent on us as the people that are trying to think outside the box to just like, let's just lead the charge and let's just make that happen, because we can do it, and it's going to be pretty awesome on the vehicle side. So.
It's always how we see it in passenger cars, is like where most people would recognize some cars that are designed to be electric vehicles from the ground up, and others which are kind of, well, they're not. And especially in the early days, there was a lot of cars on the road that were designed to be a combustion engine, and then it was kind of made to work as an EV, and always not quite optimal, packaging and squeezing the driveline in. And in a car, you can picture that. But in off-highway machinery, I know, having worked with a few big off-highway OEMs, the frame designs, the frame or the chassis, you would call it, in some of those big machines, it kind of hasn't really changed a lot for, 10 or 20 years, because they're scared to change once that design existed and it kind of got proven out in the field, it's almost impossible for them to kind of make a change and kind of prove that it's going to work under all of the different situations that the machine will be used in. So it's like, oh, don't change anything.
Yeah, because again, probably top priority for our industry is reliability. And
Mm.
when people are bidding projects, construction project, I mean, off highway equipment, construction equipment, ag, mining, marine, it it literally constructs the entire built world, and you can't, we just can't tolerate unreliability, because that's, you're going to lose a job. You're going to go over budget, and bad things are going to happen. And so the industry is, to its credit, is ridiculously reliable, right? We really know what conventional pieces of machinery can do in terms of, the total cost of ownership and what you get. But the downside of that is that it is, I think, really prohibited a school of thought that allows, we have to have we have to allow failure.
Yeah.
The fear of failure, I think, is sort of, probably the pendulum has swung too far into, like, we can't tolerate any failure.
Yeah.
And that's I do.
Yeah. Most big companies are all about minimizing risk. So they want to minimize risk, and they incentivize their staff to minimize risk and to not fail.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
they don't really think about success and how you can kind of incentivize success. And so some companies are better at that than others, but it's a difficult thing in the industry. And of course, then getting like really into it, something like a skid steer loader or a compact wheel loader that was designed for a diesel powertrain, it's very difficult to then try and package up a good battery electric driveline into that machine, because there's just bits of metal in places you don't want bits of metal. You can't have a nice, easy to install battery system, because the frame is kind of designed in a way to carry an engine and a hydraulic pump, not a battery pack.
Yeah, no, and those bits of metal are typically important. You can't drop
Yeah.
them out, because so yeah, it's a challenge, and that's what we're dealing with. That's what we're trying to address. That the vehicles, you pretty much have to, which, what I saw with developing the powertrain is, and just getting out there and trying to sell, say, the powertrain to OEMs. It's a challenge, because they look at it like that, as like, whoa, we have to do a clean sheet redesign of this platform.
Yeah.
And the platform only sells 5,000 a year. So this version is only going to start off at X number a year, and they run the business case, and it comes back to, like, there's no way, it just doesn't pencil out from that thought process. And I think, what's amazing is that allows us to have a huge opportunity. So
Yeah.
all, the conventional way of thinking is great, but that allows people like me to come in and say, if we're going to think of it completely differently, what opportunities are there to grab? And that's what we're doing.
And there's the traditional OEMs in the space tend to be very, very good at like the reliability element and hydraulics, like the sort of conventional hydraulic system. But the when you have a diesel powered, something like a skid steer, is kind of a hydraulic power pack that does stuff. So there's a big hydraulic power pack buried in there, and lots of valves, and then all hydraulic drives and stuff. But fundamentally, with a diesel system where you have a single engine and then a pump stack, and all the valving and stuff that goes off the back of it, that architecture is very tried and trusted and understood, and everyone gets it in the standard OEMs. But really, the electrified machines and systems can look and will look completely different to that. And how have you found kind of reimagining the sort of powertrain side of it?
Yeah, so this is part of the whole thing that we're doing that is pretty fun, because if you look at, like, where you just mentioned, we have a diesel engine. If you look under the hood of almost every single piece of equipment globally, outside of big mining equipment that have been electrified forever, you have the exact same system. You have a diesel engine running all the time. You have typically a hydrostat valve, valve or pump stack,
Yeah.
and then you have a fixed displacement pump for all your auxiliary work functions, and that's virtually the same system. So you're right; it is super tried and true. The challenge that we're going to have is we can't introduce a system that is wildly different in thought process, because I think it's probably going to fail, because if you're saying to people like, okay, everything you know about your piece of equipment just throw away and completely change everything, that's hard. That's hard because there's so much built in, tribal knowledge of everything, from how you deal with it, maintain it, stock parts, just everything. So it's funny, as I was developing this, what we call an e-engine, for lack we haven't quite finalized on name, but we call it an E engine for lack of a better term. And I started looking at it, I was like, this actually looks like an engine. It looks like a combustion engine. It's doing the same things because it's sort of running all the standard things that you would have on a diesel engine. It's running your steering, your hydraulic steering, it's all your hydraulic work functions, your air compressor for your HVAC. It's doing all the same things. So I started thinking like, okay, let's actually look at this further on how can we allow the owners of these future machines to deal with it the exact same way, and even easier, because hydraulic troubleshooting is an issue, maintenance, leaks, all these things. And we sort of took a very, very ground up approach from what is going to be the operator experience. It has to be as close to what they're used to as possible. So we're not expecting them to, it's just hard to understand new systems. And that's even knowingly leaving out, some things that we could do right now just because they're built into the system, but we won't activate that because it's too much of outside the box thinking for different people, because there is a lot of infrastructure on how we purchase, maintain, ship, mobilize, everything. So we've tried to look at that and say, okay, we're going to try to come as close as possible to all of that. So some of it is a little bit of a black box. We've made it so people can say replace a part the
Yeah.
exact same way sort of that they're used to. So you go in and you can actually replace the auxiliary pump. Uh, they it's more advanced because it's a complete full, sort of quasi modular, fully integrated, pump motor unit
Yeah.
with some
I wouldn't expect anything less.
yeah.
Yeah.
So trying to bridge those two worlds, right? Of this advanced technology that you can completely rewrite how the entire system is assembled, design. So we're trying to bridge those two worlds, and it's allowed a lot of opportunity to think outside the box on all fronts. Probably one of the things I'm really really excited about is the ability to swap the powertrain. And it's mainly, so what we're going to be able to do, this is our goal, is to be able to change your vehicle between either gas or diesel hybrid and battery electric in under 20 minutes. So and it's not just to make a swappable powertrain, it's actually to provide the ability to de-risk zero emission applications.
Yeah.
So if you look at a contractor that knows he has to go into a zero emission market, they're looking at it as like, oh man, I have to buy a piece of equipment that's built for battery electric. It's going to be really expensive. How are they going to actually amortize that? And what we're saying is like, you don't have to, because you'll buy the equipment and you can swap it out. So imagine a small contractor that he doesn't know what his next job's going to be, right? He knows like maybe during the spring he's doing a lot of landscaping and stuff outside, but then in the winter he has to go indoors, do commercial work indoors. He has the flexibility to buy that machine as a hybrid at a cost point that is great, and then at any point say, oh, you know what, I know I'm going to bid this pretty decent project indoors. All I have to do is buy the battery pack, and now they can go after that kind of work. So it allows a really good um, flexibility for customers for a lot of reasons. Even if you're going to say leave a machine over the winter, don't leave the hybrid genset there, because that's something that if you leave it sit for quite a few months, you're going to come back and it's going to be a challenge to get it started and flush out the fuel. Take that back, bring it back to your house, and you have a on-site generator. So just it opens up a ton of flexibility for our customers to where they don't have to think about, oh man, I want to go after this work. I want to say go into urban projects and start earlier because there's a noise ordinance, but I don't have the equipment, so I can't bid that project.
Yeah.
So we're hoping that a lot of those things on the ownership side drive some of this, because I think we're stuck in the chicken or the egg, right? Right
Yeah.
now. So
Do you think like a sense of frustration maybe has got you to where you are, and kind of in the past for like years and years you've had these concepts for electrified components and then powertrains and whatnot, and you just sort of seen them implemented, but you've always thought I would have done that differently, and now you're kind of you've that frustration is built to the point of you're just kind of just going for it. Is it a frustration thing, do you think, that's got you to where you
um,
are?
I think there's certainly a part of that. I think the part that drives me to do this is that I know what we can achieve. So I've done a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and I know what we can achieve as an industry with a lot of electrification technology. And I guess I'm just it's to me it's unacceptable that we're not doing that as an industry. So more than frustration,
Yeah.
because I guess I don't get frustrated because you gotta that doesn't do any good. I'm more like what we know we can make happen. How do we make it happen? And
Yeah.
the timing, it's interesting because for me, it would have been great if at any point in the last decade, some different OEMs would have just like jumped on board and started developing some of this. Would have been great. That's perfectly acceptable. But now seeing the global cooling of the EV market, just a lot of things. I think it's interesting because what I'm seeing is that's a lot of people are like, see, we had one foot in electrification, one foot out, and now that stuff's cooling down, that just proves our point that we should have jumped all in. Anyways, that part was a little frustrating, mainly because electrification, I think, has been not framed correctly in the industry. I
Yeah.
always frame electrification in terms of why do we buy an electric forklift? We buy an electric forklift because it's the right technology solution for our business.
Yeah.
And the industry has been co-opted on electrification on a lot of fronts um, to go down past that, we're sort of like, we're not going to look at it from a completely holistic look. We're just going to rip the engine out and put a bunch of batteries in and a motor. And that's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
It's
Well, you can
so,
see in the, I mean, the sort of construction equipment industry. I mean, some of the big OEMs have kind of done some things. I mean, you and I have
yep,
both been involved in some of those OE projects, but there's still not much on the market in terms of electrified machinery. And what is on the market is carrying a big cost premium compared to a conventional machine. So it's very specific niches that it finds a good sort of commercial case in. But in the passenger car world, it's interesting, like the current narrative, because when you actually look at the numbers, sales of EVs are doing pretty well, like in
yeah,
most places. But it's just the sales of the EVs from the OEMs that weren't fully committed to it are not doing very well. So, people are buying EVs, but they're buying them from companies that were more committed to developing them. So, some OEMs are doing very well out of that, whereas others that maybe weren't quite as forward thinking and are not. And you can see that where the numbers are coming from. Basically Tesla had everyone's lunch, and then BYD and so on have come and had dinner. So
yeah, no, and that's and it's unfortunate that nobody went all in for the off highway industry. I
no.
there are that's again, I tend to speak in like like these generalizations, so I get in trouble for that sometimes. But there are definitely companies like I actually have a good friend that he has an all electric subcompact equipment company in the U.S. and that's all they do, and they're really good at it and they're very successful. But in general, I look at all markets from the 95%. What is the best technology for the vast majority of the market,
Mm.
and we have to solve that.
Yeah.
There's I don't get excited by waking up and solving niche problems. I want to solve the because again, going back to what I said, it's like because we absolutely can solve these problems right now. We don't have to wait for batteries to get better, and we don't have to wait for the batteries to come down. We don't have to wait for anything. So
Yeah.
um, how do we solve that? No, unfortunately, yeah, no OEM has jumped in both feet uh, at the say compact and up equipment, because they look at it. It's and the way I think they look at it is they're like, okay, well, we have to invest X, a lot of many millions of dollars to develop this, but you're looking at a whole bunch of different people from different disciplines and everybody has a different approach, when the reality is you have to deal with every single discipline, the hydraulics, the powertrain, the vehicle design, the sales channels, so you
Yeah.
have to to rethink everything. So
And that's, I mean, one of the big read acrosses from passenger car, as we've moved to more electrified passenger cars, the electronics obviously become dominant in terms of the car development, and then software on the electronics to make it all work. In the construction equipment industry, very much more kind of mechanical engineering and fluid power like hydraulic systems, not so strong in software or even electronics really, oftentimes on machines development. So the more electrified machines is a big shift in skills from where the traditional OEMs are.
yeah, and you could say like, yeah, it was a challenge for automotive OEMs with their resources to catch up with the in-house technical expertise on software and power electronics that Tesla had and developed. Um,
I think you optimistically used the past tense there. It still is, I think.
it is, yeah. I mean, that's the challenge. Is like you and I know the work that goes into power electronics, motor control, all of the software and firmware that's involved. That you can't just like put an ad on something and get a
Yeah.
power electronics expert. They're few and far between. We had to, with Terzo Power Systems, we had to build it. I had to build that team and that expertise in house, and it took a long time.
And in a
So
normal,
yeah, it's
the normal OEM, the electronics guys are kind of locked in the basement and they don't let them out very often.
well, and they're highly relying on their control suppliers, their electronic suppliers. So
Yeah.
why would they have ever brought that in house, and you can't really, again, going back to you have to tightly integrate everything, which means you really can't accept buying a whole bunch of discrete controllers from different manufacturers and
Yeah.
having all of that interconnectivity, and it just doesn't work. So you have to develop it
Yeah. Inside. And the guys doing it's got to be, it's this integrated approach, like the siloed kind of culture where you have we've got an electronics business. Some of the big off-highway OEMs have got a electronics business that's part of
Yeah.
their business, but it's not an integrated part of their business. It's sort of like an internal sub-supplier that they, get to do some stuff now and again for them. Whereas the electronics guy needs to be sitting next to the guy doing the fluid system design and the machine design, and it's a very integrated approach that's needed to make all of that work. You can't have the silos of a traditional OEM.
No, and that's going to change, because one, we're going to show to the industry what you can actually do, what you can achieve, and it's going to change because, quite honestly, it has to. Because when there is, you won't be able to compete against the benefits of electrified off highway. In fact, I think the best. I actually think the best industry, the industry we should have electrified first. Of course, I was saying that almost 20 years ago, like, hey, we should electrify the off highway. But the benefits that you get
Yeah.
for electrifying off highway is actually, I think, the best use case. We should have been doing that before passenger
Yeah.
market, because then, well, we wouldn't have had the mature supply chain built for volume
Yeah.
if automotive hadn't went first. So we get that benefit, right? But if there was any a good industry to electrify, it is the off highway.
I
Now,
think
that's not an approach of battery only. I mean, I actually think for the foreseeable future, the majority of all systems are going to be hybrid.
hybrid machines. Yeah.
Um,
Agree.
but
Yeah.
then certainly it's going to be easy to tackle and grow the zero emission markets that have a lot of good reasons why we need to be zero emission. I mean, there's obviously the regulatory and statutory mandates, but then like I mentioned earlier, is the ability to go in early, for noise ordinances and urban environments, the ability to go quickly. We've all been to trade shows and conferences, right? And we've all, during setup, there's all of this heavy equipment, these boom lifts and construction forklifts, telehandlers. And I all every time I go in, do a trade show when they're doing setup and you're breathing all the diesel fumes, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. They should all be electric in here, so we have like a nice clean indoor air environment. Um, but again, that's they're not going to pay a premium on a telehandler that goes inside for 10 minutes and then it spends an hour outside. Uh, so we're addressing those kind of challenges where you don't have to worry about that. You just flip it into all electric mode, because every vehicle actually, even the hybrid, has a battery pack, right? So we have one embedded battery pack that's in all vehicles. And then, so you could always go into all electric mode. And it's the duty cycles on these machines are so diverse that a lot of applications, a lot of duty cycles, actually you'll be able to have the hybrid version and you'll be able to do almost a full day's work without the gen
Yeah.
set turning on as a hybrid.
When you kind of mentioned it earlier, and it's the, well, you did mention it earlier, not kind of, but it's like a indicator for the rest of the industry. So you rightly pointed out that very heavy mining machinery has been electrified forever, and there are reasons for that. The torque delivery characteristics of the motors being so much better for that sort of application, and it just being cheaper to engineer a hybrid powertrain at that scale than it was to do a conventional mechanical powertrain, at a similar scale. Trickling that down into smaller equipment, I think that the same kind of logic stacks up. You've got the torque delivery in the electric motors. It's so much better, like low speed. You can decouple the engine from the implement actions and stuff. And it's like so many benefits you can bring to the machine by going electric in some of the drive system, if not all of the drive system. It's nuts. The cost will out, and I think I'm starting to see some really interesting things on sort of similar but different space with the trucking. So really now we're getting electric trucks out in the wild at scale. And when I say truck, obviously, for Americans, I don't mean pickup truck. I mean the kind of commercial vehicle,
commercial trucks,
Class 8 and above. And in that world, the operating costs appear to be really tipping towards electrified powertrains, even for long distance. And I've seen a number of studies now of companies where they've been experimenting with proper production ready electric trucks from big OEMs like Daimler, Mercedes Benz, and Tesla, and the long haul duty is actually better than the local delivery stuff. It's amazing, and the economics are just saying this is a no-brainer. If I can buy a truck at a comparative cost, so coming back to your original point, then the cost of ownership and the operating cost of this thing are wildly less than conventional, because of the way that we're using it and the way the powertrain is working and the efficiencies that we can get from it being electrified. So see that coming through into, it kind of makes sense that that should be the case in off-highway equipment as well, where you've got some of the same challenges, but not all of them. So, whereabouts are you at the moment in terms of? Obviously, you've launched the business. You've been working on the powertrain side for a while. You've been working on this for a while. What's your current status? You've got a couple of products you're working on. How far along are you?
Yeah, so we're early days. So there's myself and 5 other co-founders, and we sort of looked at. I think it's going to be I think the story is going to be really interesting on how we're launching this, because what we couldn't do is I think go a traditional route of launching a company like this, launching a new OEM. I don't think the capital and financial markets want to fund this anytime soon, because everybody knows how long the road was for Tesla and how capital intensive, and just there's a lot of headwinds. So
A few
I
bloody
looked at it
noses from the some of the SPACs over the last couple of years.
that too. I think gave a gave a black eye to a lot of parts of the industry. So we have all of these issues that I looked at and said, okay, we're not gonna try to go down the traditional way to launch the OEM. That being said, later on we're gonna have to raise a lot of money, because to really scale it takes money. But getting it off the ground, I looked at it and said, how can we launch an OEM without the money it takes to launch an OEM? And I think the solution we're trying is through collaboration, and looking at everybody in the industry and said, okay, how do we engage the industry? How do we think outside the box on, a traditional startup's burn rate? How do, what kind of partnerships are there to be had? Just on every front. How do we, be strategic in launching an OEM to make it as cheap as possible to launch? Because no matter what, raising money is always hard. And we have put, a lot of time and money into the powertrain, the vehicle design, a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, you got to start making the prototype vehicles that just cost money.
Yeah.
And so we have some really fun things, really interesting things that we're working on to do that. So one of the things is a collaboration with what's called Electric Works here in Fort Wayne, which is sort of in Northeast Indiana. And something that all of the Midwest has had a challenge with is just the loss of manufacturing over quite a few decades. And in particular, there's it was a General Electric's facility that used to make motors for 100 years. The facility is called Electric Works. It was actually it was started by Thomas Edison,
Oh wow.
like 130, 140 years ago in the late 1800s. He founded it, and then it became the GE Electric Works, and they made motors forever. And when they left, I think it was 10, 15 years ago. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly when. 10,000 jobs for the region left, and it really it really the region was hard hit. And to their credit, the region got together and said, how do we address this? And they got a bunch of companies together. They also got some private money together, and they reinvested, I think, to the tune of well over $100 million to rebuild the Electric Works for innovation hub, if you will. And it's beautiful. About a third of the campus is done, but part of that is, most of that is not industrial, so we're not going to be manufacturing vehicles. But there is a building called Building 36 that is now going to be converted into, I think what's now going to be called Junction 36 by Indiana Tech here in the region. They got a pretty substantial grant to buy the building and turn it into an innovation, hard tech innovation hub, sort of a ramp up factory, if you will. And we've been collaborating with them, and it looks like we'll be moving in there. And that is going to allow us to not have to go the traditional route of we're going to have to sign no matter what, you sign a lease and you're in it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years. You just start that burn rate, and we want to have the flexibility to get as far along as possible with the least amount of overhead. So that's one example of real good regional collaboration. We get to activate students, we get to activate the community. There's just so many great aspects to that part of it, and it gives us a runway to get farther down the road, because the only thing I know in a startup is you don't know anything. You don't know what tomorrow is going to bring.
Yeah.
You don't know what partnerships might come to the table. You don't know who you're going to meet, and it might send you on a completely different trajectory. So that gives us a 2 to 3 year runway of not having to worry about that. We can crank out a couple hundred vehicles out of this facility, so it's great. It'll give us really low overhead. And then on the other side, it's what other strategic partnerships can we make, and we're just looking at that on all fronts to launch it. So to answer your original question, we just sort of formed the company last fall, and we're just launching our initial seed round of fundraising. We're doing a $1.5 million offering, which is in a couple different forms. People can go to our website to take a look at that. There's going to be more on the website in the coming, I would say, 3-4 weeks.
Yep.
So depending, I don't know when this is going to be published, but
there'll probably be more on your website by the time this is published. So.
Yeah. So what we want to do is we want to get the vehicles out and demonstrate them to the industry, and we want to get them to ConExpo next year. And what I believe will happen is that will start the beginning of a shift in our industry that is going to be really fun, because we're sort of a you have to show me for me to believe it type of industry, right?
Yeah.
And especially on some of this stuff where I don't think people quite fully appreciate how much power and productivity and enhancements and improvements. I think that, this is a pretty bold statement, but I think almost every vehicle metric is substantially improved by the electrification, meaning purchase, cost of ownership, productivity of work functions, maintenance, troubleshooting, you name it. I think it's improving on all fronts. But you got to prove that. We're making pretty crazy claims.
Yeah.
The fun part is going to be showing that and demonstrating that to the industry. And then I think that's going to start a whole new era in the off-highway industry, because then then everybody will start thinking about it. And I think it's going to be a little bit of an arms race after that, because if just imagine that you can go purchase a piece of equipment for the exact same price, or maybe even less. It's 70 to 80% more fuel efficient. It's virtually maintenance free. It's quiet. Every work function can go so fast it would scare you. So we have to software limit the performance. That's pretty exciting from an industry that has not had much change since before I was alive. So,
and what about the other? So you mentioned there's 5 co-founders that sort of picked this challenge up and are running with it. Are they all engineers like yourself, or are they from sort of a wide range of backgrounds? What's the team like?
Mostly, we're a pretty darn technical co-founding team. We have a lot of technical guys. And we also are already multinational. So one of the co-founders is actually an Italian, Davide. He comes from, he used to work at Liebherr and FCT, and he comes from, he understands the European market. We also have another gentleman by the name of Andrew Johnson. His family has run a O-ring and seal distribution company in the Midwest for a long time. He started a startup, man, it's probably 10 years ago. He's gonna get mad if I get that wrong, but he did a startup called Shelf Aware, and they're doing advanced RFID inventory management. So they're sort of this tech startup in the supply chain side, so highly technical in the entire supply chain. Robert Prohaska, Bob is actually a lead engineer at Pratt Miller Engineering. So he comes from, they do some amazing, vehicle integration and
Yeah.
military defense, commercial. So he's on our board and a co-founder. So what I wanted to do was put together a team, and then two other gentlemen actually are I would say not on the technical side, but they're on the economic development side, because the other piece of what we're doing is we're engaging the Midwest in America to support this. And this was actually before some of the recent trends of trying to bring a lot of manufacturing back to North America,
Yeah.
at least for America. So we got a pretty really solid team on that front, and it's everybody that is they're just passionate to see this happen. So we'll see. We're we're just at day one, starting to build the team. So we're very early. We actually don't have any full time employees yet. So that's going back to how do you launch an OEM without the money it takes? Is we're leveraging a lot of like part time people that are just passionate about the industry, lending their help, their expertise, their time, um, to get off the ground. Because once we get off the ground, once we show people what we can do with these vehicles, then it's sort of a whole different. Then I think we begin the journey of a traditional startup.
Yeah.
Um, so how do you get to day zero, which is the prototype vehicles, which is not standard. Usually you can pitch an idea and get investors on board, and then you make an MVP or a prototype, and then you move on. I think we're a little different. You really have to prove it in our industry. So yeah, um,
Yeah. That's a really, so you're not only kind of trying to tear up the rule book on the product side, but you're really thinking out of the box in terms of the business side of things, because there'd be a lot of people who'd be sort of wouldn't quite get your approach, but I can completely get your approach in terms of trying to
so,
do what you can
do,
do and leverage what you've got without the apart from the fact that it's a difficult time to raise investments at the moment, in
yeah.
in this space, really difficult time. But yeah, that's a really interesting approach that you're taking. So you've got the run up to ConExpo you mentioned next year, and you're hoping to put out, how many machines are you hoping to have at ConExpo?
Well,
All
we're hoping to have 3 to 5. We're hoping to have one of each.
okay.
The other thing I didn't mention is like sort of our design approach on the vehicle, on how do you make competitive, how do you make a competitive cost, how do you make a bill of materials that allows advanced electrification technology to be integrated. And you have to do that by obsessively removing all vehicle cost, and that typically comes with volume, right? Like how do you get more volume? Well, we just happen to be in an industry that is really low volume. It's high mix. Platforms are all very, very diverse. You have, take mini excavators. You have 1 ton, 2 ton, 3 ton, 4 ton, 5 ton, 10 ton, 12, 15 ton, and every one of them has a different volume. So that challenge we had to address first, and we've been working on the vehicle design to make component commonality, to take component commonality to the extreme. But you have to do it well. Simplicity in design and engineering is actually, I think, one of the most difficult things to do and takes the highest amount of skill. um you know uh Elon Musk has a really good quote where engineers are really good at optimizing the part that shouldn't exist. So I've taken that to heart on, you have to remove everything that can be removed.
Yeah.
And that's not easy because, again, going back to our discussion at siloed OEM teams, um, everybody, all these different teams have their own domain, and they're pretty territorial. So we're not, we will. So looking at the vehicle design, we've actually made a cab that is, we're calling it a universal digital cab, because it's the same cab on all these vehicles, almost identical. I would say 90%. There's a little bit of difference. And that's not easy, because if you look at the operator experience and how you actually operate this equipment, if you're on an excavator, you always have to be sort of looking forward, because you're typically looking down in a trench. You always almost usually, if you're working on a lot of projects, you have the front window open. You got to be looking down, and you got to be continually talking to the people that are hooking stuff up or helping you dig the trench or all this kind of stuff. So your actual user environment is looking down, and you have to have a good clear field of view and all that, and your controls have to match that. Well, then when you're in the articulated loader and more of a telehandler situation, you're actually, say, putting something up on a pallet or something high, or trying to dump it into a dump truck. Now your entire operator is looking up. So they've developed a lot of these cabs specifically around the platform use case. We said, okay, let's make sure that you can do all of these things. Compact track loader, skid steers, they typically get out the front, because you have these tracks. So designing a cab was no simple task that is both well done, because you don't want it to be chunky and modular, that is in a bad sense. Uh, you need the operator experience to be, we need operators when they first get in these vehicles, they're just like, it just feels like they're part of this cab, right? Which means you really have to take the UI UX like seriously. So that was no easy task. We're almost complete on the cab design, and what that does is now all of the volumes of these three platforms. We chose these three platforms for a couple different reasons. One, they're the fastest growing platforms: compact track loaders, articulated loaders, Mini X. I think I can talk about the numbers. There's pretty decent volume, right? So if we can now make components common across those, now we have numbers, as far as volumes, that are pretty close to commercial trucking, which typically are, you're shooting for at least 50,000
Yeah,
units,
tens of thousands. Yeah.
type of volumes. So that's one of the things we're doing in the design that is sort of behind the scenes, but it's absolutely critical, because you have to have the cost. You have to have the cost there, because no matter what, at the end of the day, the e-engine and the battery does cost more than a fuel tank and a diesel engine. There's just no way around that. But also, we've significantly reduced the costs required to fabricate these machines. But again, that's we've been pretty obsessive on that front. So it's pretty fun. So all of that kind of stuff is part of the show the industry, because you can't come out with some awesome machine and then say, oh, by the way, it's 4 times the cost. Everybody's like, well, that's
Yeah.
cool and all.
Yeah, it looks pretty. See ya. So, just mindful of the time now, so we're kind of just to bring things to a close. What is it? The next year or so, the things that you're most excited about? I mean, maybe inside the business, but also in the wider industry. What are the things that have really got your interest at the moment?
I think the most exciting thing is this second chapter of electrification globally in the industry. I think the most exciting thing is that we get to now use a very mature supply chain of electrification. So thanks to the fact that automotive electrified everything and drove the supply chain, and now we get to apply that to the off highway.
Yeah.
And I really think we're in an industry that has not seen much change. I think that the next 10 years in our industry is going to be not the same. So I always call it the EV, hype, the craze, the chaos of the last 10, 15 years. But that was also a lot of excitement, right? It was
Yeah.
just fun to be in the industry. We're going to have the exact same thing in the off highway for the next 10 to 15 years, but it's also going to be around products that, are just cost comparative. And that is sort of the golden egg, right? To make advanced technology that people can really, um, you know, do exactly what traditional products do, I guess,
Yeah,
without asking for a premium or anything like that.
exactly,
So,
the value proposition, having
but value, yeah,
a good value prop. Yeah, yeah, cool.
yeah. So, man, I think it's going to be wild. I'm really, really excited and bullish about I think a lot of people are scared of what's going on as far as the cooling of it and thinking that that's going to contract. Not enough highway. I actually think that the electrification of our industry, we're at literally day zero, and we'll call 2025, the first year. And I think it's going to be fun in the future. It's just going to be, and we're a global. It's pretty cool because this is a relatively close community. It's a big industry, right? It's hundreds of billions of dollars, but it's also a very tight knit, global community. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
Oh, cool. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out today to talk to me, Mike. It's been brilliant learning more about what you're up to and what's going on with Heavytech and some of your experiences. And I'm sure the audience will have got a lot out of that. So thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ryan. I really appreciate you taking the time and helping us get the word out. So appreciate it.